I'm going to go ahead and call the first of our newly redesigned Transportation and Infrastructure Committee meeting to order for the Tuesday, October 5th meeting. I have taken roll, and we have a surprisingly good attendance so far today. Just really quickly, we have a party ahead of us, so I'm going to take that. Do what?
On a bus?
Well, and a bus. Yes, a party on a bus. I'm going to have that at the heel of our agenda so we can get through the other stuff first. I have a pretty large consent, and that way just trying to be most efficient with our time. So for consent, we're going to have RS 2021-1171, BL 2021-874, 2021-879, 2021-884, 2021-916, 2021-917, 2021-918, 919, and 920. Does anyone have anything they'd like to pull off of that consent before I go through reading all of them? Final chance. All right. So, I'm sorry?
Did you say? No, never mind.
So for consent, here we go. RS 2021-1171, Allen and Young approves a contract between the Metro government and New Origin Systems Incorporated to provide annual maintenance support, necessary upgrades for various mission-critical applications for public works. BL 2021-874, O'Connell Toombs and others. Authorizes the conditional abandonment of a portion of Alley 371. Approves the acquisition of an interest in certain real property and improvements thereon, comprising a new alley, and the granting of an easement above that new alley in connection with the development of a project in Nashville. BL 2021-879, Henderson Toombs and others approves an agreement between the Metro Department of Water and Sewer Services and Piedmont Natural Gas Company for shared use of MWS Access Drive. BL 2021-884, Murphy and Nash abandons existing sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manhole, and easements, and to accept new sanitary sewer main, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for property located at 4005 Utah Avenue. BL 2021-916 by O'Connell provides the honorary street name designation of Billy Sherrill Way for a portion of 18th Avenue South. BL 2021-917, Roberts, Murphy, and Nash authorizes the Metro government to negotiate and accept permanent easements for the Neighborly Avenue Stormwater Improvement Project for 6 properties located on Neighborly Avenue. BL 2021-918, Parker, Murphy, and Nash abandons an existing storm sewer easement for 2 properties located at 900 and 902 Dickerson Pike. 2021-919, Rutherford, Murphy, and Nash accepts new sanitary sewer and water mains, sanitary sewer manholes, fire hydrant assemblies, and easements for property located at Burkett Road Unnumbered, also known as Burkett Ridge Phase 6. And last but not least, BL 2021-920 by Murphy and Nash abandons existing sanitary sewer main and easements and to accept new sanitary sewer mains, sanitary sewer manholes, and easements for 3 properties located at 5540 Oakmont Circle and 262 and 264 White Bridge Pike.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the consent agendas? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Magnificent. I'll make sure no one else did. Consent is approved 10-0. Now, back on resolutions. RS 2021-1125, Nash, Bradford, and Stiles. I know that, let's see, Councilwoman Henderson will be here in a few seconds. She is in an elevator on the way up. So
here she comes right now.
there she is. All right. For purpose of discussion, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Councilmember Nash, you are recognized on your resolution.
We have a proposed friendly substitute.
Yes.
I would yield to Council Lady Henderson to explain her substitute.
All right. Sorry to put you on the spot as soon as you walk in.
I apologize for being tardy.
You are forgiven.
Thank you. We spoke last in committee. I think there was some concern concern around kind of the magnitude or the inference perhaps of the word study and what that might entail traditionally, right? That would be funded in a certain way by an independent consultant, et cetera. Staff has shared with us that there are several conversations already in progress with TDOT related to gravel, bikeway maintenance, some cleanliness issues. So it seems like there are some conversations in progress. So my intent here was to make sure it was in the spirit of what the sponsor intended and just kind of not necessarily dial it back, but just, kind of do an internal analysis and also not necessarily operate from the presumption or maybe the inferred presumption that we had the expectation in so doing this that we would indeed take on all these things, because as you can tell from my substitute, we have got quite a lot of TDOT center lane miles in this county. So, there might be some strategic opportunities, as Chair Young has shared in his own city up north and so forth. But I just thought we could reword in a way that might get us there a little faster and maybe not to the magnitude that some might have been concerned. So with that, I would ask for your support.
All right, and just to reiterate, I think the key differences, the key points in your substitute, number one, instead of indicating or inferring all TDOT right away, it says some,
Right.
With the intention that it's what's strategic and makes sense. It adds bike lanes and changes the word from study to, I think it was feasibility analysis, or
Determine something like that.
just making that language a little less,
Determination, feasibility.
I'd use the word strong, but anyway. So, any further discussion on the substitute?
Was it anything determined about the cost in your discussion?
I think that's what this resolution is intending. We want to kind of get to that and see either piece by piece or bit by bit what would be incur, and that maybe in doing that we could try some partnerships before kind of doing an overall.
So no idea of range or anything was provided?
For the
No.
feasibility analysis, I guess, this is just to do the analysis to come up with the cost, correct?
Correct. That's my understanding of
Well,
the
and-
chair's intent.
Hopefully, there wouldn't be a cost to us.
Okay.
You're getting the state,
Right.
you're getting the state to reimburse us. Right now, they hire contractors to do a lot of this stuff. Maybe we can take some of that over.
All right.
And Mr. Chair, I would invite the original sponsors to please sign on to the substitute, as it was, their work and their idea. It's not my intent to, sometimes it's awkward by way of substituting and our name comes to the front, but I would invite the former chair.
I'd be happy to.
We have to.
Thank you.
All right. Any further on the substitute? All right, on the substitute, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Substitute is, the bill is set, or the resolution rather, is substituted 11-0 on the resolution as substituted. Any further discussion?
Move to adopt.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. That also passes 11-0, or is recommended 11-0. Next, BL 2021-867 by Councilmember Cash, O'Connell, Evans, and Porterfield. It amends the Metro Code of Laws regarding night parking restrictions. Councilmember Cash.
So moved.
Oh, thank you.
So this went through what was the Codes Committee, and in the Codes Committee, we felt that it needed to be re-referred back to this committee because it is about something that's in the right-of-way and not on private property. In the Codes Committee meeting, there were a couple of issues that came up, or some questions that came up about enforcement and about what I guess some folks were thinking about. Situations that could come up, like a tour bus that's parked behind Ryman as a group is performing, But I do believe that there's some issues that have come up that this bill would address and resolve. And also, Councilman O'Connell was one who originally brought it and asked me to sign it. I think it came from the administration, but do you want to speak to it, Councilman O'Connell?
Sure, I'm happy to, Mr. Chair, if that's reasonable.
It would pleasure me tremendously.
Let's watch our language. And I will describe, so we've had a couple of bills along these lines that have come up since the Christmas bombing, and I understand it. This one actually originated out of a neighborhood context where there were combined safety concerns and traffic concerns, where large box trucks were basically parked on some of the narrowest streets in Germantown in an area that does not get a lot of traffic. And so there were concerns about, okay, this location seems like it would be an easy place to park an out-of-the-way vehicle. Also, it is creating really unsafe traffic conditions. We talked about it with NDOT, and basically we looked at, could we do some signage? Could we do a few other things? And they said, look, this is a problem that we may actually prefer to solve through policy, and this is the approach that we've looked at. And so, yeah, it has a lot to do with vehicle size. And I guess, Hannah, I might look to you to ask, on these concerns about buses, what the impact of other night parking provisions that we've had, can you give us just sort of where things stand right now today in terms of what vehicles can be parked on public rights of way and during what periods of time?
Sure, or at least I'll attempt to. This section in particular has been amended a couple of times in the last year or so. Currently, as the law stands now, no school bus or recreational vehicle in excess of 24 feet, nor a dump truck of more than 54,000 pounds may be parked on any street or alley within Metro between sunset and sunrise.
And that is prior to this bill, correct?
That is currently what the law is today. Notwithstanding this bill is just still pending. So that had been reduced. So it's currently 20 feet. That had been reduced from 24 feet earlier this year.
Right, and so, again, we looked at it earlier, and this is looking at the classes of vehicles. So in this case, I know I've heard some concerns from folks that, hey, this might this may impact people that don't have a home, for whom, public right-of-way parking could be their only option if they do have access to a vehicle. I mean, this to me would not target, for instance, a cargo van or a Sprinter van in most cases, correct, at 20 feet, we think?
I don't know
Probably
the
not at
length of
54,000.
No, your average van's about 17 feet long.
Okay.
So,
18 tops.
again, I think based on the specific condition we were looking at on the public right-of-way and coordinated with NDOT to look at, I think this is reasonable. As I mentioned in codes when we were over there, when we last discussed this, if people have concerns that we can address through tightening up the legislation, I'm fine. But this is basically one more increment beyond the bill that we already looked at earlier, where the specific case in question and the neighborhood that contacted me about this issue, the department we worked with to look at the policy, this is kind of the policy outcome we arrived at. So I'm open to suggestions on further improvements, but if we don't have other feedback or concerns, I'm also happy to pass it as is.
Councilman Bradford.
So just a clarified question, this legislation doesn't impact, say, personal cars and vehicles that are parked on the streets? Because I've had some people kind of questioning if we're policing private citizens who are parking in front of their homes, which...
No, this absolutely is specifically intended not to do that. I've had several people contact me over the years about RVs, and I think that was also potentially one of the issues that arose in the previous bill. For larger RVs, this could have an impact, but this is definitely not to restrict public right-of-way parking, because we also have many people who take advantage of that just as is in neighborhoods that I represent, and in fact, many of those people were part of the group that approached me about pursuing this.
Or Councilmember Cash?
Thanks. I think one other thing that came up in the codes meeting was like construction vehicles near construction sites. I think this would, and I'm not coming to a conclusion about whether it's good or bad, but I would assume that this could apply to that.
It could, again, if there's a lot of difference between 20 and 24 feet in the industry, you know, I haven't gone out and surveyed on an equipment basis what that would be. You would already be hard-pressed to park like an 18-wheeler flatbed adjacent to a construction site on public right-of-way, correct? Like under the current law?
There's a current provision about semi-trucks
Okay.
that's separate, and there's no parking at any time unless actively loading or unloading.
So I think for most of the classes of vehicles we're looking at, this would be a relatively small impact. This is mostly, the conditions we were looking at were specifically kind of mid-range box trucks.
Gotcha. And I guess I'm asking in part because the like sunset and sunrise, like especially the sunset, is not going to perfectly parallel parts of the year with construction hours.
And I mean, if we'd like to make a change, I mean, again, that was basically going off of existing provisions. So I was trying to be uncomplicated about the approach here, but if we want to make tweaks, I'm happy. I would say friendly amendments accepted.
I'm not offering one. I just wanted to, you know, at the last committee meeting in a different committee, these are some of the questions that came up, and just wanted to make sure that we don't have any unintended consequences. But I'm fine with it the way it is.
Okay.
Councilmember Gamble?
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank you for bringing this forward because I've also had a lot of concerns, neighborhood concerns about semi-trucks more so than the big box trucks. But I think this will help alleviate some of those issues, particularly in the downtown area. I do intend to look at the code and see how we might strengthen the semi-truck regulations because I think right now it's trucks over 18,000 pounds
Yes.
are allowed to park, but most semi-trucks start at 10,000 pounds. And I get calls all the time from communities, suburban, urban communities all throughout my district that have issues with people who drive trucks for a living, parking their trucks on the street, leaving them there for weeks at a time. And it's a safety hazard, it's an environmental hazard, and we do need to do something in that arena as well. But I think this is great what you proposed today and kind of starts the ball rolling in strengthening regulations in that area. Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
I just was going to say that I appreciate the issue about construction vehicles, but I think as many things are, this will be complaint-driven, and it provides a tool for dealing with nuisances that are there for months at a time. If somebody's there for an hour, that's unlikely to create a complaint unless it's a construction site that the neighbors hate and they're just looking for something. But, I think it's going to be a more useful tool for long-term abuses.
Raising it, the lawn mowing people, they're pretty good sized trucks that park while they're mowing a lawn. Is that covered? And they're very often they've got equipment that's long.
Do they
So
mow
this is-
overnight?
Yeah, that's what I was the question. Is this for night mowing?
I'm sorry, you teed me right up.
Hey, nobody else was
Never
gonna say it. I
mind.
was gonna say it. I don't know. Guy comes out at 9:00, I'm gonna shoot him.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anything further? Any other silly questions? Not that there are such things as silly questions.
Only silly
Councilmember Nash. Just silly people. All right.
Aye.
All of those in favor of those opposed? All right. It passes 11-0, or is recommended 11-0, and we're going to skip that for, oh, no, that's it. Okay. All right.
Someone dial emergency.
BL 2021-911, O'Connell, Withers, and many, many more. Amends the Metro Code pertaining to the composition of the Metro Transportation Licensing Commission. Amends the Metro Code pertaining to the operation and regulation of entertainment transportation vehicles. Amends Section 9.20.020 pertaining to vehicle noise, and amends Section 6.75.240, 7.74.040, and 12.54.210 of the Metro Code pertaining to the consumption of alcoholic beverages in vehicles. Councilmember O'Connell.
Motion.
Second.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. We've got a motion and a second, and I'll briefly describe this if it's okay. So we have spent the better part of a couple of years looking at this and having people at both the local and the state level examine this entire sector, because through most of Tennessee Code Annotated, it is very clear that we can, through our Transportation Licensing Commission, regulate golf carts, regulate scooters, regulate pedal carriages. As a new class of vehicles kind of entered that entertainment space where it is not about taking people from point A to point B, but rather point A to point A with a lot of woos between point A and point A. We have seen that there is some confusion about whether or not we can regulate it. I think at this point, we are comfortable between lawyers locally and peers in the General Assembly and throughout the state that we can empower our Transportation Licensing Commission to start the rulemaking process. If you look at this bill, 90% of it is that conferring of authority to the Transportation Licensing Commission. There is a slight tweak to the membership of the TLC in there. There is a slight tweak to authority of the TLC on noise. You'll look at that. Let me do this. Mr. Chair, if I might, let's go ahead and move the substitute, because I think that's where we really want to start the discussion. There is a substitute, and I'd like to move that.
So moved.
Certainly.
Okay, so what I'm describing is in the substitute. This legislatively where we got to is, okay, we think we are far enough along in legal review that we are comfortable filing this. We did have some technical corrections from Metro Legal that are also in there responding to this, the original bill. We have talked to industry in the interim. I will be bringing a late filed amendment to the floor that tightens up the window. The biggest provision in here that has generated the most conversation and probably consternation in industry is the provision that eliminates basically BYO alcohol. What we are proposing to do is shrink the window and give that an effective date of December 1st. The regulatory piece per TLC guidance pushes out to April. That also gives a window for the state to potentially respond to us, ideally collaboratively and favorably. And we are going to be bringing a subsequent bill that basically introduces, we're waiting on some review from Metro Legal. It might be an either or both and, look to create effectively a new permit for BYO and or kind of a mobile catering permit to give the opportunity for people to potentially have a licensed server on a vehicle or to allow BYO, but to have that permitting process potentially run through the beer board in such a way that if you did not meet the performance standards under the TLC, that you could potentially lose your beer permit. None of these regulations exist right now. This segment of that mobile entertainment industry is basically unregulated. We do have a little bit of noise and moving violation we could potentially apply, but I think this overall package, by the time we get to April, TLC has its rules. We bring everybody back in under an appropriately permitted service of alcohol approach. I think we will see that just like the other kind of destination industries, that we will work this back into a tolerable place where right now, and you can see this from the number of co-sponsors, I would rate this as having reached an intolerable point. So I would welcome discussion and see where this goes tonight.
All right, before we dive deep into the discussion, I want to take a moment. We have some guests with us from Hume Fog, and I did want to afford them the opportunity for 2 or 3 minutes if they have anything they'd like to add to the conversation, because we certainly love that there are some students joining us and wanting to be part of the dialogue of what's going on, especially when it is a school that is right in the dead center of where a lot of this is going on. So if any of y'all would like to stand up and share your name and give us your 2, 3, maybe even 4 cents.
Hi, my name is Julia Wolf-Dubin, and I am the student leader of the HFA Committee for Peaceful Learning. And we have a name. We have a name, a committee, and a mission that really should not be a problem. You know, I really would like to assume that it's basic Nashvilleian or otherwise common sense that drunk people in schools do not mix. You know, drunk people, we have honky tonks. Drunk people belong in bars, at least according to my parents, and, you know, life in general, drunk people stay away from children. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with people having fun on buses or being drunk in general, but there's a part of Nashville that's, you know, all good with that. And, you know, I don't go there because I'm 15 and they wouldn't let me in anyway.
We hope.
That's a bigger issue.
And so they don't bother me. They don't bother, you know, people who aren't really looking to do things that require not being drunk to do. So just generally, I don't want my schools to be interrupted by drunk people. I don't want people's lives to be interrupted by drunk people. I really would prefer not to be sitting in a classroom trying to take an AP World History examination at the end of the year that really counts for colleges to get college credit and have a bunch of drunk people screaming woo-hoo every 10 seconds. I feel like that should be something I'm entitled to as a student and as a human, to not have really important college examinations and just my schooling in general interrupted by drunk people. Also, there have been really disturbing incidents at our school with students having things thrown at them, with a student being flashed, where a grown adult showed a minor their genitals because they were drunk on a party bus, and the party bus people were drunk right next to a school. That's just not okay. That's just not okay. I think this bill would stop that, which is why I'm here. I don't want to see that. I don't think other people want to see that. It just doesn't make any sense, really. I don't really understand why this is a problem in the first place, to be quite honest. But I'm a proud Nashvilleian. I really love this city. I wouldn't dream of wanting to grow up anywhere else. But this kind of sucks. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Rachel Dubin, and I'm currently a freshman, and I'm only 14, but I've gotten to hear things and see things just within the first 9 weeks of me being at that school that, I never thought I'd say a sentence where, can you, I never thought I'd hear a teacher say, pedal faster, or go faster, don't stop in front of the school. And I didn't think I'd have to be in the middle of taking a math test during my study hall time, which is 11 o'clock or noon, right after lunch, and be interrupted 4 times within 10 minutes by party buses while in the middle of a very important math test. Or just having to be in French class, trying to pay attention to one thing, and then hearing just a bus drive by with people screaming, you know, as adults, by a high school with a bunch of 14 to 18-year-olds trying to do their work. And it's not fair to us when, I get it, you can have fun, but, not in front of our school. Don't just start yelling in front of our school. It's not fair. And it shouldn't happen. And also, there was the AP World History teacher, as Julia stated earlier. AP World History teacher was interrupted 38 times in one day from 10:15 in the morning to 2:50 in the afternoon, which just isn't That's a lot. That's not a thing that should happen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may, I'm T. Jordan, co-sponsor of Safe Fund Nashville, and I first just want to always recognize these two young ladies who are doing a great job standing up and making their voice heard about something that's important. Only thing I will add is we've had about a 7 to 8 year window to have self-regulation. That has not occurred, so it's time for us to step up, and I appreciate if you guys could get behind Councilman O'Connell's bill and get that passed to help keep Nashville safe, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate y'all coming and participating. With that said, I guess I will now open it up for discussion on Councilman O'Connell's substitute, Councilman Cash.
On the substitute,
We are on the substitute.
I'll wait till we leave the substitute.
Okay,
I'll wait for the bill as well.
okay. Anyone else on the substitute?
Yes, just a clarification on the substitute. I hadn't had a chance to look at it. I know it just came out today. It clarifies the permit for alcohol.
Well, sort of. So we've got a late filed amendment that will extend the window to let us get another bill along that
Okay.
would establish that permit. So it sets an effective date for the alcohol piece of December 1st and the rulemaking piece at TLC for April. So it kind of, it closes the overall window by putting the start date out. I mean, it originally, as filed, the bill would have pretty much taken effect as when it passed.
Okay.
This gives the TLC basically time to work through the winter and that's what they advised. So that's in conversation with the department. And the alcohol piece comes after considerable discussion with industry about basically the approaches that they could work with on that permitting basis. And so we wanted to get time to at least get that bill, and get the analysis back from Metro Legal, start the process at council, and maybe even pass it so there's barely any overlap.
Thank you.
I think Councilman Cash.
I did, and because my question, thank you, Chair, is similar to Councilmember Gamble's. We need to make sure that it also clarifies that the person who's serving the alcohol has license. Not just the license can be, that they can just serve it on there, but also whomever serves is licensed to do so.
That absolutely came up as a part of it. People who will be serving, and we know, particularly among the pedal carriages, they were adamant about that piece. So that will be in the next bill principally, because that will be the bill that deals with the permitting process for alcohol. But that we're taking that under consideration.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Okay. Just in the interim, if we do this and now nothing happens until December, I would love to be able to assure these ladies that the next semester is not going to be a bust for them. Apparently, I mean, the noise ordinance applies to all vehicles already today. Is that not true? Can we begin to enforce that tomorrow?
Theoretically, yes.
And but it would have to be the police right now because we haven't given the TLC the authority
That's
to
correct.
do that. Once we give them the authority, then they could revoke a
Their
permit, for example.
inspectors, et cetera. And that's
Gotcha.
the design, is to say, part of the teeth here is, we're creating a new permitted application for you to be able to pursue the business model you've been pursuing. And the teeth come from potential revocation of that permit for violation of, if we had a quiet zone at Hume Fog, if we had a quiet zone around urban residences, right, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. And until we do this, we won't be able to set up boundaries where they could, but once we do,
Once we do,
TLC has the
TLC can
authority
do
to
the
do that.
rulemaking that they've done for all of the other similar vehicles.
Exactly. And I have noticed some, just very recently, some vehicles with open metal containers, which our law currently specifically prohibits in the public right-of-way. Could that not also be enforced starting tomorrow?
I guess theoretically, and I would look to Mike and Hannah to potentially confirm that.
Yeah, that has a 15-year duration, and there was some confusion as to the origin of that original legislation. The thought was that it was originally designed to prevent projectiles. So plastic cups were not prohibited, but any metal container was. Not certain about that, but yes, that's on the books today.
Metal and glass.
That's been an issue also, projectiles.
Projectiles is a
Like
problem.
projectiles from buses to
So-
students.
Metal containers is in cans
And Yetis, for example.
Yeah,
and Yetis, okay.
yeah, but mostly it's
Now,
beer can.
but back to the quiet
But my
zone.
question is just the interim. Can we start doing something tomorrow? Or can the industry offer the opportunity to
Well,
say?
it's my understanding that I think, I don't know of all, but that a lot of them have stopped going by the school. I think there are some operators here who they're nodding yes.
Yeah, it's true.
And-
It's better. We appreciate that.
Okay, so it has got, and that was going to be my question to students and teachers there is, has there been a notice difference?
Thank
Okay.
you.
But is that due to the weather?
Definitely not.
I'm just gonna say that, I mean, we want to applaud these students.
Absolutely.
For sure. And since that press conference, I can just attest to these guys that they have not been going by there, and I know that there are other operators that have agreed to that too. And it's nice to hear that maybe it is a little bit better, but we're gonna get better at that, even without the regulations in place yet.
Yeah, we got the first formal complaint and immediately changed our route, and so we don't go by the school anymore.
No, I'm sorry, could you identify yourself in
My
the
name's
committee?
Forrest Broyles, I'm with Honky Tonk Party Express.
Councilmember Swope?
And just to clarify, because I know there's people at home wondering, scratching their head going, now wait a minute, what can they enforce tomorrow? What can't they enforce tomorrow? When does this start? What happens in April? What happens December 1? Let me be very clear here. If this passes, not just tonight, but on third read in 2 weeks, alcohol is permitted or banned until December 1.
If the substitute with my late filed amendment were to pass, there would be no change to alcohol until December 1.
Gotcha. And as of December 1, it would be essentially banned unless,
You are already basically regulated by the TLC or operate an enclosed vehicle like the drag bus.
gotcha.
So pedal carriages would be status quo, drag bus, those kind of things.
So it becomes the onus of this body, that body, actually, to figure out how we're going to regulate alcohol on open buses of larger than 14 people between now and December 1.
So I think the expectation would be, well, sort of, I mean, I think the expectation is we're going to arrive at a permitting allowance, and then we are going to let the TLC do the rulemaking for effectively those folks that are not under its jurisdiction right now. And then in April, when they are done with their rulemaking, part of that rule set will be, here are the terms under which you basically, sort of re-enter in the good graces of the TLC.
Okay, so let me clarify that last statement. What you're saying is alcohol gets banned on December 1 and won't be reinstated until April.
That's correct.
That,
On unenclosed, over 14 passengers.
I mean, basically what we are proposing is a cooling off period similar to what we did with scooters while we went through the RFP process.
how does the industry feel about that?
So let me build on that before we just go having a Socratic seminar. Do we not feel, or I guess what is the strategy behind doing this in pieces rather than as a comprehensive reform, together at once?
I think part of it is the expectation, there are two parts to the interaction with the state. One is an awareness that there's an assumption that they want to see Metro take a step, right? That moving from effectively zero regulation to some regulation and figure out whether that's appropriate. Similarly, there is an expectation that we may still prefer, from a local policymaking standpoint, to have an update to the Tennessee Code Annotated that affirms without any question the ability to do what we're seeking to do to the Transportation Licensing Commission. I think in doing this, right, the overall strategy absolutely includes the acknowledgement that things are out of control to the point where we have, high school doing a press conference, right? And again, multiple co-sponsors as the bill was being filed. I think there is a recognition citywide that things are out of control and probably should cool off. It's worth discussing that.
I guess for me, it almost seems as if one of the strategies is punitive in trying to, punish some members of an industry that we are now seeing, steps of good faith, saying, hey, we don't want to be bothersome to a school, for example. And so I feel like we're maybe being a little, I don't know. Councilmember Allen?
I would just ask a question. I've forgotten now because last winter was so atypical. But I mean, how much is there driving around between December and April? I mean,
There's a good bit.
There's a lot.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. I mean, I know we've regulated heaters on moving vehicles because that's not really a good idea. Will there continue to be a lot if we can't have a heater on an open vehicle next winter, do we think? I mean, I'm just asking, I mean, it feels, like the hay. It does feel like we've chosen a time when activity would be at a minimum, just due to.
Sure. So does anyone from the industry want to tell us if you can't have a heater, will you operate in open or unenclosed?
We've never done that. That's unsafe.
Yeah.
So, but the unenclosed buses, is it typical for them to operate in the winter?
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
Councilmember
we'll have a natural slowdown of the season going in December. We do pick it up back in February and March. And according to, do we have heaters? No. Do we have an open flame? No. We'd actively seek to have some regulation against that as well, too. But I do have a piece, to say on the enclosed versus the unenclosed is, on the alcohol piece, is that going to apply to enclosed vehicles? Are they going to have the same rules as an unenclosed vehicle? So, for example, we use retired school buses, and one of them is open air, taking bachelorettes or conventioneers, and one's enclosed. But they're running the same route, same vehicle, same driver essentially, but are they going to be, for beer-wise, treated differently, even though they're exactly the same tour and so forth? I guess that's a question that we have.
And a good question that it is.
I mean, it's my understanding that yes, they would be treated differently under this, but Councilmember Hurt?
I don't really have a question, but more of a comment, because I've read the letters from the students and from the teachers. And having a conversation, I guess, about the money or the economy as a result of these transportainment vehicles, I think it's a no-brainer. I think when you look at the businesses, they have to pay overhead. They have to provide for people to be able to come into their establishments and offer entertainment and all of these things. I believe that what we have in these transportainments is just another way of driving revenue, bringing tourists here, and all of that we welcome and we help. But I don't think that we need to be legislating based on what it is that's going to make it convenient for them. But we've got to think about our local residents, our students, our people who are here now. And whatever we put out there, then they have to abide by those rules. And I just don't think it's fair to them for us to really consider doing something to make it more convenient for them. I appreciate the creativity and what they've done to come up with these vehicles and offer this multimodal transportation. But I think that the lives of our citizens and those who visit us, because I'm sure people in Texas now are really concerned, that we have to put some rules and regulations, and we know that it's a problem with enforcement. So if we cannot have the police enforce those things as they need to be, we need to make sure that legislation does.
Anyone, or Councilmember Smoke?
I would come back to this gentleman's question, and I want to hear this from Councilman O'Connell. What you're saying is on December 1st, if you have two identical school buses, one of them has a roof, one doesn't. The one that doesn't have a roof now can't have any alcohol on it, correct? But the one that does have a roof can.
That's correct.
Hard to follow them with the roof.
Well,
It's also harder to make noise,
I understand.
right? It's, you know, generally speaking, the worst of the behaviors we've seen have been from the unenclosed vehicles. And similarly, like we're looking at tractors, it's not just the
Hay bales,
school
I get
bus,
it.
Right.
And I'm a co-signature of the bill, so, you know, but this is a tough one, and I don't have a problem with any part of this, except the fact that we are being highly selective in what we're going to terminate on December 1.
Temporary.
But there's no guarantee that it's temporary. There's nothing in here that says this will be mandated by so-and-so a date. I would suggest eliminating that part of this, letting it pass with the full understanding that, yes, we are going to crack down on alcohol and we're going to let the TLC have more control over that in the future. But rather than hammer, what, maybe 20%, I'm going to guess, open vehicles this would affect, you're selectively killing 20% of people's business, or 20% of this industry, while not changing the rest of it.
So-
And I understand the reasoning behind it, and I don't disagree with it. But I do disagree with the way we're going about this.
If this body does not feel like a cooling off period is reasonable, then that's what amendments are for, right? I mean, I think for me personally, having heard for 2 years the issues of an industry run amok that disrupt the ability of students to study, that disrupt the ability of urban residents, not just in downtown, but now increasingly in the neighborhoods peripheral to downtown, getting all the way up to Councilmember Gamble's district, getting over into Councilmember Taylor's district, getting down into Councilmember Cash's and Sledge's districts, going across the river, you know, points north, south, east, and west, loading and unloading at all hours, coming home from bars, dumping off a bunch of people at a short-term rental that still exists in a residential neighborhood. I mean, I think it's really about the way we are perceiving the issue. I think I'm probably more aligned with Councilmember Hurt in that if we have come this far and we think we have the option to make a regulatory effort that can stick, and we don't want to do any cooling off while we go from the point of saying, yes, we're going to secure this authority and then put that authority into effect a few months later, we can have that discussion. For me, looking at I mean, this is always the case, right? If self-policing worked, we would not be here.
Freddie, I do not disagree with anything you're saying.
We are here.
My problem exists in the fact that we are literally isolating a very small sliver of a much larger industry.
And that sliver is the sliver that is currently unregulated and the one about which that 20% generates 80% or more of the complaints right now. The regulated portions, I get so few complaints about comparatively now. And so, again, I am basing this approach on a large group of stakeholders that, you know, encompasses residents, students, downtown employees and employers, and property owners up and down the entertainment district, frankly. So we do have a lot of support for this approach. If people are uncomfortable with the approach, then we change the approach.
Like I said, I agree with everything in this, except for singling out that one group.
Okay, Councilmember Gamble.
Question, and I'm not sure who can answer. Is it possible that after the December 31st, we have the regulation in place and the regulatory board in place? At that point, everyone starts from zero and then starts to get their permit, so that if there's not a cooling off period, there's still a period where before alcohol can be served, they have to get this permit, whether it takes 1 month, 2 months, however long. It may not take until April, but they still have to go through that process.
So I think the trick here is, right, the distinction between those vehicles and operators that are already regulated, right? And so this conversation originally, right, I mean, I'll say this, right? There are plenty of people who have observed this entire thing that would be perfectly content to wipe the whole of this entire industry off of the streets of Nashville, from pedal carriages on up through tractors and party buses. My personal take, having looked at this issue and industry for years, is that those operators that are already going in front of the TLC on a regular basis are operating in more of a race to the top than a race to the bottom scenario. I think the question I have, because I have seen no real effort to bend the curve until just recently, after a press conference at Noon Fog, that the process of that rulemaking period, I mean, I'll just say this. I don't have a lot of confidence that we're going to see voluntary behavior change unless we coerce it. And that is my take. And I'm happy to have that conversation, right? I mean, I guess.
But this legislation would make it so that anyone who's not regulated would have to get the permit to
Right.
operate.
I mean, and again, we are talking about future legislation to establish that process, but the point would be, I wouldn't really want to go into a space where we didn't yet have the rules, but said, okay, you guys can go get your beer again. Now, that may be one approach, though, that lessens the impact, right? To say, we're gonna say, everybody's back in with a beer permit, but y'all can still have Wild West for a few more months.
The point that I got from that's really significant is the cooling off period also allows time for the rules to be written.
That's correct.
So that we're not just starting day one and then having to.
We can do it the other way. I will just say, I haven't seen until literally the last week or two a lot of signs of, oh, we're changing. Look, we're here to do this right.
Okay. Thank you. That answers my question.
Councilmember Cash.
Thanks. I am in support of the substitute and the strategies involved. I think we can't, and I hear what Councilmember Swope is saying about, being concerned about impacting a business that's been doing something for a while. However, alcohol is central to what's going on here. It is central to what's going on. Yep. It's creating people who will throw things at children and expose themselves to children. It's the alcohol that's a part of that. And while I don't take it lightly to undo something temporarily undo something a business has been able to do, like, we've got to fix it. And I think this cooling off period is essential to fixing this so that the industry can continue. And I think we're singling out a specific type of vehicle, as Councilmember O'Connell pointed out, because it is, the other vehicles are containing their noise and containing their shouts at people, and it's integral to the open vehicles that we find solutions to it. And so I don't take it lightly, but I don't see how, without a cooling off involving the alcohol, we can we can really fix this in a meaningful way. I do have hopefully a quick question, if I may. So this legislation, and I've looked through it, and there's a lot of details in it. This legislation is setting some guidelines and then tasking the TLC with coming up with the rules that they follow. And we expect those to be in place by April. Does anything come back to us at that point in time?
They're the rulemaking body. I mean, I would invite Billy Fields to potentially speak to how this has worked with other.
Mr. Fields, you can never seem to get away from the TLC.
And I'm not doubting it, that their good work. I just want to know. Like, we've given them some guidelines, some areas to consider, safety, and I'm assuming geography. Councilmember Allen asked a question, it was quick, but I think I understood that the TLC could dictate some boundaries, like she did last term with the slow-moving vehicles specifically, but now we've seen additional types of vehicles that aren't regulated in a geography. So the TLC is open to or tasked with that part as well, looking at geography of where they're allowed and permitted.
Yes, and many of the ordinances, my name is Billy Fields, I'm the Director of Transportation Licensing. Many of our ordinances already give the commission and/or the director the authority to establish certain boundaries in which the industry can operate. Typically what we would do is meet with the industry, talk about the boundaries and get their input, and then it goes back to the commission for a public hearing to be done on a public hearing.
But I mean, what I will say is that they have their own public hearings, just like, other commissions.
Right. Thank you.
Anyone else? This is good discussion, y'all. Committee members, sorry.
For the late filed amendment.
Call the question.
Okay, well, there's no more discussion, so. This is on Councilmembers O'Connell substitute. Those in favor of the substitute indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? No. And how many are we up to? I think we had, I guess we're back to 11.
No, we're 12.
We are, yes, I'm sorry.
Vice Chair showed up
Yes.
really late.
How vice of you.
Stand in the corner.
So, we now have the bill as substituted, and I believe Councilmember O'Connell has a late filed amendment for it.
I don't even know, can we apply that before I go to
Yeah,
rules?
you can get a recommendation on the
And
amendment.
they're waiting for any rules. by the way.
Okay. so
Oh,
that-
well then let's do that very quickly then.
So the late filed amendment is the thing that pushes forward the alcohol to December 1st instead of effective upon passage. So I would encourage colleagues to support this.
Any discussion? Those in favor?
Can we talk?
No. Aye?
Aye.
Those opposed? Now, we're on the bill as substituted and amended. Because we all have other committees to get to. Do we have further discussion? Do we want to potentially, Councilmember
I will
Allen?
just say very quickly, because I know it is a concern for the students. I think because we are putting these rules in place and the industry knows that we will be watching who behaves and respects things, we can expect that they will not be driving down in front of Hume Fog between now and when the rules are promulgated. So whether this is effective immediately or through December, I think the effect is still gonna, I think what we've seen today, and I'm happy to sit down there on the corner of 9th and write down license plates of company names and say, these are the ones who aren't respecting our needs, and it won't be these guys because they're here and they care. But I think it's important for y'all to know that we want our high schools to be safe and productive places. And
I'm just worried about what's gonna happen between now and December.
And I believe that if there is anybody misbehaving, they will know that when they go in front of Billy, they're not gonna fare well.
So there's, or Council.
I'm sorry, I just want to note to just this line of discussion. The gentleman here, I want to point out that he mentioned that once there was a formal complaint, that they stopped going by the school, and I want you to remember that formal complaint.
A complaint.
I'm sorry?
It's a complaint.
Oh, okay.
A complaint, period.
8 years, 8 years and no
All right,
self-regulation.
so, thank you. Is there further discussion, Councilmember?
I was just gonna ask, is he the sole owner of those,
I think he's one of many of the different ones operating within downtown.
so therefore, there could be others who will not abide by the...
Absolutely, absolutely. Councilmember Evans.
I just wanted to understand if there was a reason why we couldn't defer for 2 weeks to allow a little more industry input.
I was getting around to suggesting that because I think there's been some other things been thrown out as possible amendments or substitutes or things to discuss further. I hate to even say these words, but is there even appetite? Do we want to try and do something special called and have a long, good discussion? Because this has been great discussion. I think it's been fruitful. I will throw that out there.
One question for legal.
Sure.
Can this or can this not be amended on third?
This cannot be amended on third.
I didn't think so. So this is going to be the defining moment for this, in which case I would recommend a 2-week deferral so that quite possibly we could all get together, sit around the table, and work out the legalities of the alcohol component of this, and whether that is banning it from everybody on December 1st or from no one on December 1st. Either way, I just don't think it's fair to separate one little segment of a much larger industry. So my motion is to defer for 2 weeks and let
2 weeks is in one meeting.
all of us sit down at the table again and see if we can't hash out the details and make your life a little easier in the meantime. Because right now we're separating this even though we're not separating it. And we're separating it into a little separate. It's a separation of a separation of a separation, which is going to get really complicated on December 1. We're all going to come back to this table and go, what did we do 2 months ago?
Well, Councilmember Swope, I guess I would say if, a one meeting deferral, we would be back around this table again, and also once more probably crunch for time again. Are we thinking that members of the committee might be bringing amendments or substitutes, or when you're suggesting more conversation, are you suggesting an additional meeting to hash this out? Councilmember Allen?
Called meeting next week.
A called meeting next week. I do think that's probably best. But I guess first, we do have the motion to defer one meeting on the table. Is there further discussion on the motion to defer?
On the motion to defer, I just wanted to ask Councilman O'Connell because, respectfully,
Yes.
he has done a whole lot of work on this. He knows the stakeholders. It transpires almost entirely within his district. And so I appreciate that we have opinions on this and you have that concern. I can see how a deferral would allow for you, Councilman Swope, to garner more understanding and deliver an amendment that you would like. But, respectfully, I don't know if we need especially called another meeting about this. We've had an extensive discussion. And then again, as often happens in our body, which I think sometimes the public does not understand, because if you're going to have, the lead sponsor is doing a lot lot of work.
He is, and I
so
anticipated returning to him
I appreciate that,
last.
but I would defer to his judgment on a deferral or a deferral with a specially called meeting and, what he thinks would be the most constructive, because either way, members of this body can bring amendments and do their own research, et cetera.
And
So,
my intent was to let him have the last word, so.
appreciate that, yep.
I have no confidence that this will be the last word, but I will say two things, I guess. One, the one meeting deferral doesn't, to my mind, injure the bill. It's not something I am asking of colleagues, and that leads me to my second point, which is we have HUMFOG students here tonight with their amazing librarian. We will have a room full of people here tonight watching to see where our interest is in representing Nashville, right? Is it basically listening to representatives of an industry that has demonstrated so far how badly they can behave in Nashville, or is it representing the interests of people who live here? And that is the fundamental question. I think if we defer, we will be discussing just how bad is alcohol, just how necessary is it to this industry, and what will happen to the industry if they lose the privilege of operating with alcohol. And, I think the framework of the bill is pretty clear, that it is about having a cooling off period, and so that's the discussion we'll have in the space of a deferral, I assume and expect.
And then,
Well,
Mr. Chair,
Councilmember O'Connell, I think you do a disservice to the council in framing it that way in such a simplistic way, because as you know, it is often that we as council members have to discern from the what something might be on the surface versus the complexities of what is in it in the bill. And if there are people here tonight watching us, then
that's fine.
That's great, but I hope they're watching us.
Technical corrections to the bill, that's fine. I think that what I am hearing in the room, Mr. Chair, is that the focus on this period of deferral would be specifically around availability of alcohol to this industry. If there are other technical corrections or other things in the complexity, they have not surfaced today, and that is what I'm speaking to.
Okay. Understood. I have other things I'd like to explore, like the insurance and whatnot, but Councilmember Henderson, you were...
I think I would like to speak in support of if the collective body wants to defer, that we not do it with the special meeting, because I think that the alcohol specific concern is effectively addressed by the cooling off period. How viable is your business model without people on your vehicles drunk in that way? Do people still want to show up and have their mocktails and their soda pop and enjoy being out on our streets but not intoxicated? So the bill itself, Councilman Swope, kind of has in there a proof of concept, right, in that cooling off phase. So if we, by way of further meetings, kind of have to argue about, well, my business model won't work without alcohol, it's just going to be, he said, in that regard. So I would encourage us, if we want to take time to propose some amendments to facilitate further conversation, but I think, citizens have spoken over many years, and so I would encourage us not to kind of drag it down, because a lot of good work has been done. So I would only support a deferral motion, not one with an additional meeting.
Well, and as selfish as this is, I'm completely okay with not having more meetings. That was just, I threw that out because there seemed to be a lot of great discussion. Councilmember Hurd.
So when it comes to being consistent, I know that producers of festivals that may be annually once a year, they are required to not only get a license, but each person who's going to serve alcohol must have a license, and they have to have $1 million liability insurance where they name the Metropolitan Davidson County as a party of that.
Yes, ma'am. We're on the motion to defer. Councilman Cash.
So therefore, on the motion to defer, I am not in favor of it, and that is the reason why, with all due respect.
Councilman Cash.
Question.
Any further discussion? On the motion to defer one meeting, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Let's do roll.
You
You can have people raise hands if that's.
Do what?
Yeah.
You can have people
Raise hands.
Oh, okay. Those in favor of deferral, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those opposed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, boy. All right. So, motion to defer fails. We are back on the bill as amended and substituted. Councilmember Cash?
Call the question.
Okay. All of those in favor? Aye, or you know what? Raise hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. No, it is not. I assume this sponsor is voting. Okay. Okay.
He had a finger up.
Okay. Then that is all of us. Yes. Wait, are we at 11 or 12 now? Did anyone else get, okay.
I'm still here.
You're at 11.
We're at 11.
All right, folks, we had a pretty exciting first meeting of this committee, so we're adjourned, and I look forward to less exciting times.
There you go, Zach.